In our today's session, we are going to talk on Microsoft Excel, right? So this will be our third. We will be talking the Office package. So Excel means actually we use this software to work with the data and the numbers, right? For example, if you want to create a report, right? Or else if you want to create some financial data or a financial report, right? You can use Excel, right? So for every task that you deal with data and numbers, you can use Excel, right? So today we are going to see on the basic things of Excel and how to make a data table using Excel, and how we can use some basic formulas on that data, right? So when we start Excel, this is the interface that we get at first, right? So similar to the other softwares that we have gone through, here also there are templates, right? For different kinds of activities that we can do, there are different kinds of templates here, right? But to start from the scratch, what I will be doing is I'll be taking a blank workbook here, right? So if you all can remember, in Word we got a blank document, right? In Paint we got a blank presentation, and in Excel I'm going to take a blank workbook and start with our lesson, right? If you are familiar with Excel, or if you are doing something specific with Excel, then you can use a template also, right? For now I'll use a blank workbook, right? So when I take a workbook, this is the basic interface that I will get after selecting a blank workbook, right? So when we look at the interface, it is pretty much similar to the other softwares, right? We see tabs, we see ribbons, so the interface is quite similar, right? So I'm not going to waste time on defining what these tabs are and what these ribbons are and what these buttons are, right? Because as you can see, there are very similar buttons that we use in Word and PowerPoint, right? But the interface totally changes from below this ribbon, right? As you can see, down from the ribbon, there's a separate interface. It's a different kind of an interface. So before working on Excel, we need to make sure that we know this interface very well, right? So I'll start for below the ribbon. So this interface is where we work, right? Where we type and where we use our formulas, right? So this larger area, right, with these boxes, right? This thing we call as a sheet, right? So in Excel, we work on sheets, right? If in Word, we took a blank document and we worked on pages, right? On PowerPoint, we took a presentation and we worked on slides, right? Similarly, in Excel, we take a workbook and we work on worksheets, right? These are sheets, right? So this sheet is actually like a maths book, right? You can see it is divided into rows and columns, right? So these rows in this sheet are actually numbered, right? You can see on the left hand side, they are numbered, right? Row number 1, 2, 3, 4, likewise. And the columns are also given a name, right? So they are given an alphabetical letter like A, B, C, D, likewise, right? So each of these rows and columns are named so that we can identify them very clearly, right? And these boxes, or a place where a column and a row meets, we call this as a cell, right? So these are cells, right? So for example, this row, this column comes downwards and this cell comes this way and meet here to form a cell, right? So there are millions of cells in this sheet, right? So when I click on a cell, right, you can see a difference, right? It is a bit highlighted rather than the other cells. So when I click on a cell, it is called as an active cell, right? So I'll just type here. Now, this is an active cell, right? When I click on a cell and I type something, the typing thing will be typed on the active cell, right? That is the name, right? So others are cells, and when I click on a specific cell, it is known as the active cell, right? So when talking about this sheet, actually before working with the sheet, we need to make sure the perimeter or the area of this sheet, or how big this sheet is, right? For example, how many rows are there, right? Now this is numbered, I told you, right? So does it end from 100 or 1000, right? And does the columns finish from Z, like it starts from A, and does it end from Z? We need to make sure the size of this sheet, right? So in order to get a basic idea on how large this sheet is, right, I'll take you to the last row and the last column of this sheet, right? So that you have an idea on how big this sheet is, right? So in order to go to the last column in this sheet, you can use the control button, right? You can press the control button and press the down arrow key, right? Press the control button and the down arrow key, so that you will come to the last row of this sheet, right? So the last row of this sheet is numbered as 1,048,576, right? So there are more than 1 million rows in this single sheet, right? That is how large this sheet is, right? And also when we talk about the columns, right, you can go to the last column by pressing control key and pressing the right arrow key, right? When you click on the right arrow key, you come to the last column of this sheet, right? So the last column of this sheet is named as XFD, right? So in order to get an idea, I'll tell you the specific number. There are around, as far as I can remember, there are around 16,000. I can't remember the specific number, around 16,000 columns in a sheet, right? So that you can get an idea how large this sheet is, right? It's, I think, 16,384, as I can remember, right? So that is the number, right? 16,000 columns and 1 million rows, right? That is how big this sheet is, right? So even though this is a big sheet, we are not going to utilize all these 10 million rows and 16,000 columns in a work, right? We can't do that actually. That is not practical, right? But you have to have an idea how large this sheet is, right? So when we are working on Excel, what we normally do is, if we are doing simultaneous activities or different kinds of activities, what we do is we take multiple sheets, right? Rather than doing everything on the same sheet, what we do is we take multiple sheets and do our different activities on different sheets. That is how we work, right? Now, for example, you can see here in this sheet, below this sheet, you can find its name, right? This This is a default name, right? It is named as sheet 1, right? So if you want to take another sheet, there's a plus button here, right? By pressing this button, you can add another sheet to your workbook, right? Likewise, you can add any amount of sheets to your workbook, right? So when you're working with Excel, make sure to take multiple sheets when you're doing multiple activities, right? Rather than doing everything in the same sheet, right? So that is the basic idea of this interface, right? And also keep in mind that these sheets also have that specific number, right? This second sheet also have 10 million rows and 16,000 columns. Likewise, every sheet you take has that number of rows and columns, right? So uh, when we talk about these cells, right, these cells also have a specific name, right? So that name is formed by intercepting this column name and row number, right? For example, now I have clicked on a cell. This active cell's name is D6, right? So the name is formed from the column name and the row number, right? So this name can be seen here, right? So this is called the name box, right? When you click on a cell, right, automatically this name box shows the name of that specific cell, right? So that you can identify what cell this is, right? But if you are going to work with Excel, you have to have an idea. When you straightforwardly click on a cell, you need to know what this cell is rather than looking at this name box. You must be able to tell the name, right? It's very easy, right? Randomly, if I click somewhere, this is H70, right? So here, this is V4, right? Likewise, every cell has a unique name, right? So I'll talk in the future why this name is very important, right? For the moment, remember that these cells have a unique name, right? So that is the basic idea of this interface, right? So if we want to type something on Excel, it is very easy, right? It is very easy for type in Excel because it's a table actually, right? So we worked on tables in Word also, right? So here also the same thing. What we have to do is we can just click on a cell and type anything we want. We can type numbers, we can type text, we can type anything, right? So for example, I'll just type some sample data in order to show you how this is done, right? So I'll just make a small table, right? So in this cell, I'll type ID, right? And I click on the next cell and I type name. In the other cell, I'll type English, maths, science, right? Likewise, you can click on the cell and type anything you want, right? So after typing anything, right, after entering any data, you can format this data, right? Format means you can make changes to this data, right? For example, if you want to change the font or increase the font size, right, make them bold or add a color, right? Those are called formattings. You can do any formatting after typing this data, right? So in order to apply a formatting, I told you this earlier as well, right? The golden rule is you have to select, right? In Word or in PowerPoint or in Excel, if you need to apply any formatting to a text, first you must select that, right? So selecting means actually, if you want to select a cell, what we have to do is just click on the specific cell. Right? Once we click on the cell, actually that is selected. Right? If we want to select a group of cells, then what we have to do is we have to click on a cell and drag, right? Without letting the mouse button, we have to click and drag, right? Then we can select multiple cells as of our choice. So that is how we select, right? A single cell, it's very easy, just click on the cell. If it is multiple cells, just click and drag, right? So after selecting, you can apply any of these formattings, right? For example, I'll be using the home tab. In the home ribbon, we see some familiar buttons, right? These things we discussed in PowerPoint and Word as well. So I'll just increase the font size, right? Now see what happens when I increase the font size. The selected cells, the font in the selected cells will be increased, right? So I can bold them, underline them, right? Anything I can do, right? So for the moment, what I'm going to do is increase the font and I'll apply a color, a background color, right? A fill like this, right? And also I'll make a change to the alignment as well, right? I'll center the text here like this, right? So I'll make small adjustments, right? So when you are typing on Excel, right, you might face a problem like this, right? For example, I'll type in a separate place, right? Let's type Saman Kumar, right? Saman Kumar series A. I'll just type a name, right? So when I'm typing, and you'll see that the text that I typed was moved to the other cells also, right? I see that this data is moved to the other cells. Right? What I can visually see is it is typed on 3 cells, right? But actually that's not the case, right? So when we are typing something on a cell, right, you have to make sure, right, if the space is not enough, it will be displayed like this, right? We can see the text is going over the other columns, right? But actually, it's not happening like that, right? Actually, we can see the content on the cell by clicking on this, and we can see what this cell contains actually, right? So this is what we call the formula bar, right? In the formula bar, we can see when we click on a specific cell, we can see what that cell actually contains, right? So in the next cell, actually, there's nothing. And when I click on that cell, there's nothing, right? What happens here is because this word is too large, it is displayed as like it's overgoing the other columns, right? So for that, what we can do is we can adjust our column size, right? What we can do here is we can go to the top of the column here, and your cursor will be changed to an icon like this. Then click on that and you can drag, right? And align your columns with both the rows height. You can do both ways, right? So if the space is not enough, that is the thing that you should do, right? I have seen some students, what they do is when they type something, they think that the name has gone to 3 cells and they start typing from the next cell. They start typing from here. They have left 2 cells because of this problem, right? Actually, this is not a problem, right? This is like an illusion, right? They get caught, they think that the text is overgoing to other cells as well, right? So the problem here is there is no space. So adjust the space, right? So I'll type some sample data here. I'll type some IDs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. right? So I just entered some dummy data, right? So for these also, you can select these columns and apply any kind of an formatting if you want, right? I'll just enter the text so that it is even there, right? So this is how you enter any kind of a data into Excel, right? So you can simply just type and then do some formatting and make it very clear, right? So this is how we enter data, right? So you have, I guess that you have seen many Excel files, right? So this is how the data is entered there, right? So working with Excel to just to enter data is very easy, right? If we are going to enter data and just look at it, it's very easy to work with Excel, right? But working with Excel means not just making tables like this and just entering on data, right? So working with Excel means you need to know how to use formulas and equations to get something done, get your work done, right? So suppose now I'm a class teacher, right? So I have some students in my class and they have some subjects and they have scored their uh, exams. So I need to calculate the total, the average, and all those things I need to now calculate, right? So with these entered data, what I can do is I can use Excel formulas and equations to get my calculations done, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend this table to do some calculations, right? So that is what I'm going to do, right? So I'll just add some columns here, right? I'll add total. Sorry, I'll take the, yes, I'll take the total and I'll take the average, pass or fail, and right. Right, I'm going to fill out some data, right? So I'll, right. Okay, so I need to get the total of these students. So I need to get the average of these students, and I need to verify these whether these students have passed or failed the total module, and I need to find their position, rank, right? And I'm going to find some other details as well, right? So in order to do these things, we need to know what formulas and functions are, right? So when working with Excel, there are two kinds of things as formulas and functions, right? So a formula means, right, we can use the normal arithmetic operators such as addition, subtraction, right, division, multiplication, and we can create a formula to do something, right? Now, for example, I'll do it on a separate sheet, on sheet number 2, right? For just example, suppose this column has number 50 and other column has number 80, right? So I need to get the addition of these two cells to this cell, right? I need to get the addition of these two cells to this cell, right? So in order to do that, I can use a formula also. I can use a equation function also, right? So to get this idea, I'll just show how this can be done by a formula first, right? So because we need to have the basic idea of what a formula is, right? So if we are going to add this, what we are going to do is normally 50 plus 80. No, if we do with this with the calculator, we are doing is we first type 50 and then we press on the add button and we click the next number. That is how we do, right? But when we are working on Excel, we are not dealing with this data, right? We are not actually considering what the data is. We are actually considering is the cell name, right? That is what I told. These cell names are very important, right? Because we deal with the cell name. We are not dealing with the data, right? So in order to do this, in order to add these numbers, we can write a formula, right? So when we are writing a formula, right, or a function, right, anything, right, we need to write that formula or function in the place where we need the answer, right? Now, for example, I need the answer here, right? So I have to write the function or the formula on that specific cell, on that active cell, so that the answer will be displayed there, right? That is the first thing you need to make sure. Click on the specific cell where you need the answer. The second thing is whether you write a formula or function, you have to start with the equal sign, right? A formula or a function always starts with the equal sign, right? That is the other point that you should remember, right? So I need to add these, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm not giving 50 and 80. I'm giving the names of these cells, right? So I need to add E4 cell and E5 cell. Those are the two cells that I need to add, E4 and E5, right? So I can manually type that, right? What I'm typing is E5 or E4, right? E4. When I type E4, see what happens, right? Excel automatically detects that specific cell there, right? E4 plus, I'll give the plus sign and I type the other cell, E5. Right? Now this is a formula actually, not a function, right? This is a formula, a normal formula that we used to do in our primary agents, right? E4 plus E5. Rather than writing E50 and 80, we wrote their cell names, right? So after writing a function or a formula, you need to press on enter, right? Then only the specific answer or the specific function will run and give us the answer, right? So when I click on this cell now, right, what you can see here is, right, you have to see it very carefully. I see 130 in this cell displayed, right? But when I click on this cell and see at the formula bar, you don't see 130 there. What you see is the formula behind that answer, right? I'll say it again, right? Earlier, what you saw was when I click on a cell, I see the data here, right? When I click on this, I see English. This is the content that is in the cell, right? But as soon as I write an formula, get the answer, I see the answer in the cell. But when I click on that, I see the formula of the function behind that answer, right? So that is the formula bar, right? If there's a function written on it, you don't see the number there, you see the function of the formula for that answer, right? So if anyone has a doubt on this 130, they can click on this cell and see what had happened. So they can get an idea. E4 and E5 is added to get this answer. That is what has happened, right? So that is basically how a formula is written, right? You start with the equal sign And then you keep on giving the cell names and the respective arithmetic operators that you want. Right? So if you want a multiplication, what you should do is you can press equal 50. Sorry, I'll just type first, right? When we are typing, it is automatically detected, right? Right. So rather than typing this, what we can do is simply, right, we can click on the specific cell. And so typing cell names would be very boring when we are working with a large number of data, right? So what we can do is we can directly click on the specific cell so that Excel will automatically detect the cell name, right? So E4 into E5. So I'll press enter, then I'll get the answer. Right. Likewise, you can write down formulas by using the normal arithmetic operators. So that is very easy. Right. So if you are going to apply a formula here with the basic things that we learn, we can get the total also. It's very easy now. Right. So what we have to do is add these three cells to get the total. Right. So I'll just show a formula here. What I can do is I'll press equal, then G6 plus H6 plus I6, right? Those three will add and give us the total 221, right? So it is very easy, right? When we are working with formulas, right? But in Excel, we are not going to use formulas every time. There are specific situations we have to use formulas, right? But generally, what we do here is we use functions. Excel has hundreds of functions for different types of activities, right? So we are not going to talk about everything, right? We are going to speak on specific, some general functions that we can use. Right. Now, for example, I showed you how to get the total using a formula. Right. So the same tasks can be done using a function as well. Right. So just I got the answer from a formula. Right. So average also I can get from a formula. Right? I can just divide this by 3 and get the average. Right. That is a formula. The same thing I can do using a function as well. Right. So from here onwards, I'll be focusing more on functions and not on formulas, because when we are working with Excel, we should know functions more than formulas. Right. So the first function that I'm going to talk about is sum. Right. So I'll just take a notepad and show you all. Right. The first one we are going to talk is sum. Right. Sum function. Right. So this function is used to obtain the total. Right. With this function, we are going to take the total. Right. So there are two ways we can insert a function here. Right. First way is we can manually type on the function. Right. So if you are a beginner of Excel, I would recommend you all to manually type the function so that you will get an idea on how this function is written. Right. But if you are familiar with Excel and you have some knowledge with Excel, then you can use the other method, which is you can directly insert formulas and functions from this tab. Right? There's a specific tab called formulas, and there you have insert function option. right? From there, you can go and directly add your required function. Those are the two ways, right? Inserting from this insert function option or typing it manually, right? So to be general, I'll show you on how to type this function, right? So this sum function, right? The layout of this function is like this, right? The syntax of this function is like this. It starts with the, I'll just increase the font size. Don't know whether you all can see. Right. So the syntax would be equal sign, the function name, sum, and the data range. Right. So this is the syntax. Right. We start with the equal, we type sum, and within brackets we give our parameters. Right. So what the numbers that we are going to add. Right. So let's see how we can write this function here, right? So to get the total, I'm clicking on this cell because this is where I need the answer. So I'll click on equal, then sum, right? So when I type after the equal sign, you can see when I type, Excel gives me suggestions, right? So they give me suggestions that are similar to that specific name, right? So when I type sum, it lists down all the functions that are related to the word sum, that starts with the word sum, right? So you can either double click here and get the function, or you can just keep on typing, right? I'll just double click here. So as soon as I double click, you can see the brackets also appear, and then I can give the data range, right? So data range means the number set that we are going to add, right? So the number set would be 45 to 78, right? So those are the three numbers that we need to add to get the total here, right? So I can either type it manually or go and click and drag on the specific cells, select the range, right? So when I click and drag on the specific range, you can see the range is automatically typed here, right? From G6 to I6, right? We when we do mathematics, we do this, right? G6 sitter I6 dakwa, right? Likewise, we can get the range, right? So it automatically gets the range, right? So after adding the range, you have to close the bracket and press enter, right? So the same answer that we got from the formula is obtained using a function also, right? So if we click on the cell, we can see in the formula bar the function behind that answer, right? Equal sum G6 to I6, right? So that is how we write a function, right? So this is the syntax, and this is an example on how it is written, right? You have to give the starting cell and ending cell only to get the range, right? That is what has happened here. G6 to I6, right? So we are done with the first student now, right? So there are 5 students now, right? So do I need to do the same thing to these 5 students, right? So that would be a very boring task, right? Now suppose there are 100 students in the class, then I would have to be typing it 100 times to get the sum for every student. So that is not practical, right? So if we actually think logically, right, what happened here is everybody, we are getting the sum, only the range is different, right? For this Kamal student, also we are getting the sum, but the change is the cell numbers, the range only, right? So we can copy this same function to this cell also, right? The same thing is happening here, right? So we can just copy this formula function to this column, sorry, this cell as well, right? By changing the range. We can do this automatically, right? So this option is called as fill handle, right? In Excel, there's an option called fill handle. We can use that to copy a specific function to the other, right? Because the same function is happening for other students, we can copy this function and apply to others as well, right? So in the home tab, you can find this option here, right? Fill option, right? You can fill down from here to copy this same formula to other students as well, right? So rather than going here, you can do it from here also, right? So if you look at this cell very close, I'll zoom it a bit, right? If you look at this cell a bit closer, you can see a small box here. And when I click on this active cell, there's a small box here at the corner, right? So when I close my mouse near to that box, my cursor changes to a cross, right? So when your cursor changes to a cross, click on that and drag to the bottom, right? Without leaving the mouse button, click and drag to the bottom part where you need to stop and release the mouse button, right? And as soon as we release the mouse button, we get our answers, right? What happened here is this same function is copied to other cells while changing the data range, right? So if we have a doubt about the answer, we can click on this cell and see how this answer has been calculated, right? So the sum here is from equal sum G7 to I7. No problem. The range has been automatically incremented, right? In the next cell, G8 to I8. Other one, G9, I9. Final one, G10, I10. Right? So when we fill handle, actually what happens is the function is copied, and in the meantime, this range is also incremented respectively, right? Respectively. It is very important to know that word, right? Because we have given the range as G6 to I6, right? So as soon as we fill, what happens is this range is shifted to here, to the below one, to the respective one. When I go further, what happens is it is incremented row by row. That is what happens. It is incremented one by one, right? They are not editing our range actually. What they do is they increment the range as per the row, right? But ultimately what happens is our formula is copied and we get the answer within seconds, right? If there are 100 students, I can just click on here and drag to the bottom 100 student and get the answer within seconds, right? That is how it works, right? So that is the sum function, right? So then I'll move to average function, right? So average function is, it is also similar to this sum function, right? Average is used to get the average, to obtain the average, right? So what happened is the word only changes. The way the function is written is similar, right? What we do is equal average and we give the data range. That is what happens, right? So I'll just type here equal average, open bracket. I'll give the range from G6 to I6, right? The reason for giving the total range is so that he will calculate the average out of this range, right? That is why I'm giving the total range here, right? So when I give the range here, what they do is, as soon as I press enter, what they do here is, what this function do here is, he will add all these and calculate the number of cells within that range, and they will divide it by the total, right? So two things happen in this function. First, they get the total and they count the number of cells there and divide it that by the total, right? So when I press enter, this is what happens. They first take 221 and divide it by 3 and they'll give the answer as 73.6667, right? So that is how we get the average from a function, right? For the rest others also, what I can do is just click here and fill to the bottom. It will automatically give me the answer, right? No problem, right? So I hope you are clear on this two functions, right? Sum and it's very easy, not that hard, right? So then I'll move to another functions, some general functions here. Those are min max functions, right? So these two functions are used to get the minimum value and the maximum value of a data range, min and max, right? Min means minimum, max means maximum, right? So these two functions can be used to get a minimum value and the maximum value of a range, right? Now, for example, this column has the English marks of the class, right? So I need to check whether what is the lowest and the highest mark that has been obtained for English, right? So I can use the min and max functions to get that, right? So since this is a small data set, we can just see and tell what is the lowest number, right? But if it is a larger data set, it is very difficult, right? So for that, we have to use formulas, functions, right? So I'll just type the min function here. It is also the same way, right? Min function is used to obtain the minimum value. What happens is we type it as equal min and the data range, right? So the same layout, right? So I'll type it here equal min, open bracket, and give the range from here to here, right? From G6 to G10. That is my range, right? And I'll close the bracket and I will press enter, right? So that it will return the minimum value, right? Actually not obtain here, right? Return. It will return the minimum value. That is what happens, right? So for the others also, I can do this, right? So we can fill sideways also, right? So in the earlier two, we did filling downwards, right? So we can fill left and right as well, right? So what happens is the formula is copied and the range is shifted to the other ones, right? And let's move to max. right? So max is the vice versa of min, right? It returns the maximum value, right? So it's written in the same way, right? You can write it like this, right? So I'll write it equal max, and I will give the same data range here, right? G6 to G10, right? So it will return the maximum value in this data set, and I will fill it to the others as well, right? So that is min and max, right? And there are another three functions that I'm going to discuss. Those are count, counter, and count blank, right? So these three functions are used for counting, right? So as soon as you see the word count, you can get an idea what this function is actually, right? These are used to count. But these three functions count in three different ways. That is what we need to know, right? So count function, right? What it does is it will count cells with numbers only, right? If we need to count something and if we give a range, it will count the cells with numbers only, numbered data only, right? And on the other hand, counter means it will count the number of cells with the numbers or text, both, right? That is what happens, right? So I'll just show the syntax first. What happens is count function count the number of cells with numbered data, right? It will count the number of cells with numbered data or numeric data, right? So how it is the same way we wrote min and max, right? Equal count, and we give the data range, right? So for example, I'll show here equal count. I will give the range from here, right? For you to get a better idea, I'll start from here, right? Including this cell that is having a text, right? English cell to 85 cell, right? From G5 to G10, right? So I'll close the bracket and press enter so that you will get a count, right? As number 5, as 5, right? So this function has counted only the number cells, the cells that are having numbers on, right? So actually this range has 6 cells, right? Starting from here to here, there are 6 cells, but it has counted only 5 cells because it has neglected the cell with the text data. It is not counting those cells, right? That is how count works. So the answer will be same for the others as well. No change, right? So counter means it will count numbers and text both, right? Count the number of cells with both text and numeric data. It will count both, right? So I'll type here count star, and I will give the same range from G5 to G10, right? And I'll close the bracket and I will press enter. So you will find that the answer is 6 now, right? So what had happened here is it has counted the English cell as well, the cell with the text data also. So it has returned the value 6, right? So keep in mind the difference of these two formulas, functions, right? And count blank means this function will count the number of blank cells within the data range. Right? So it is written in the same way as count and counter. The only difference is it will count the number of blank cells. It is the only difference. Right? It will count the blank cells. Right? So I'll just type here equal count blank. I will give the range from here to here, right? So the same range, G5 to G10. So I'll get the answer as 0, right? Because there are no blank cells within that range, right? So I can use this formula actually to get an idea whether a student has participated in the exam or not participated. Right? Now at the moment, every student has participated in the exam, so no one has bunked the exam. Right? So let's see, Kamal has bunked the exam, so he is not having a grade for it. Right? So then I can see there's a blank cell here. Right? So one cell is missing some data. Right? That is the purpose of count blank. We can count the number of blank cells there. Right? So hope you are clear with these functions. So these set of functions actually go in the same way. Right? The function name and the data range. Function name, data range. It's very easy. Right? So you have to get an idea. I'll just put this in the chat also so that you can refer to it later. Right? These are the functions. That we did now. Right? So you can get it from the chat on how the formula is written here and an example on how it is written. Right? So moving on to the other part, right? I need to get the pass or the fail status for the student, right? Now this is a quite different thing from what we have done here, right? So getting the pass or a fail means it is a condition, right? We are testing our data against a condition and we are deciding whether he is passed the exam or not, right? Now, for example, let's suppose we are getting the pass fail from the average, right? So if the student has an average more than 50, he is passed. And if his average is less than 50, he is failed. Let's suppose like that. So that means these students are failed, they have failed the exam, and these 3 students only will pass the exam. Right? So we need to check that using the formula. Right? So to do a thing like this, right, we have a formula called function, right? We call them as a function, right? If function is used to obtain obtain a result using a condition. Right? If function is used to obtain a result using a condition. Right? So we can test our data against some condition and get an answer. That is what we use the if function for. Right? For example, if the average is 50 or more than 50, then he is passed. If it is less than 50, then he is failed. Right? So how are we going to do this? Right? So I'll just show the syntax first, right? So the syntax would be a thing like this. I'll just write it first. Right. Right. This is the syntax of the if function. Right. So now when we compare to the other functions, right, this is a quite different one. Right. We have many parameters here. Right. So in the earlier ones, we had only the data range. But here we have several parameters such as logical test, value if true, value if false. Right. So when we are writing the if function, we should always have a condition, right? So we are checking our result against some condition, right? So the condition is known as the logical test. That is what happens, right? So it is not mentioned as the condition, it is known as the logical testing, right? So for you to get an idea, I'll just write within brackets. The condition is known as logical test, right? And value if true and value if false means, now if we have an if, we have two scenarios, right? When we put an if, we have two answers, right? True or false, yes or no, right? On or off. We have two options, Boolean values, right? So this value if true means the thing that we are going to display, or we are going to give out in the cell if our condition is true, right? We are typing something here to display if our condition, if this specific condition is true, display this. And if our condition is false, we are typing something here to show when the condition is false. Right? So get a better idea, I'll show the function, right? I'll write the function here, right? So I'm going to take the pass and fail from the average. So my criteria is if the average is more than 50, he's pass. And if it is less than 50, he's failed, right? So what I'm doing here is I'll writing equal if, right? And I'll open a bracket and you can see here now, right? When I'm going to type, they will ask for the parameters here now, right? Logical test, they are asking me the logical test now. Right? Logical test means the condition, right? So what I'm going to say is if K6, this is where my average is, right? If the K6 cell is greater than or equal 50, right? This is my condition. I'm asking them to check whether K6 cell, the data in the K6 cell is greater than or equal 50. Right? If K6 is greater than or equal 50, then I'm giving the value if true thing. Right? I'm telling within inverted commas, I'm giving show pass. Right? If K6 is greater than or equal 50, comma, value if true is pass, comma, value if false, I'm giving fail. Within inverted commas, I'm giving as fail. Right? So what happens is, if the condition is true, it will display pass. If the condition is false, it will display fail. Now in our scenario, actually the condition is true because K6 is more than 50. So it will display ultimately pass. So I'll enter and we can see the answer. It will check against the condition and give the result, pass or fail. Right. So I'll fill it down, see what happens. The same function is applied to other text as well. So in this 32 and 48, we see 2 failed students because their average is not more than or equaling 50. So their condition is false. So the value of false is displayed there. Right. So that is how the if is written. You can use it for different scenarios, right? So I'm just showing a specific scenario. Whatever your scenario is, what you have to do is give the condition, comma, value if true and value if false, right? Don't jumble it, right? Some people write the value if false in the beginning and they then write the value if true. That is not the way. I make sure you write the value if true in the beginning and then the value if false, right? So I'll just copy this and paste it here. So that this is how it is written, right? So make sure you have a clear idea about the condition because we are checking this. Right? These things we can manually type and we can type anything here, right? But this thing have to be specific, right? So that is what happens here. And I'll write another formula here, which is precision, right? Or the what we call the rank. We can get a rank, right? I need to see which student is the first in the class and know the second likewise, right? Panti kiyweniyada kiyala mata balala. So for this type of activity, we have a function called rank, right? Obtain the rank of a data range. This function is used to obtain the rank of a data range, right? So when we are writing rank equal rank, here also we have several number of parameters. Sorry, I didn't write it there. First write it here. This also we have several number of parameters like this, right? Number, reference, and order, right? So I'll write it and show you how this is written actually, right? So when we are taking a rank, right? When we are obtaining a rank, we need to specifically know for what data set we are applying this function, right? So for example, in this scenario, we can get our rank or the position from the total, right? We are going to take it from the total, right? So the number means, the first parameter, the number means the starting cell of our data range, right? This is our data range. So we should give for the number parameter, the starting cell. It is J6, right? And comma. And for the other part, we have ref. Ref means the reference part, right? Which means our whole data range, right? Which means from J6 to J10, right? Ref and order, right? Which means this range, right? So this is actually partially complete, right? This is not fully complete because we need to provide the reference here. right? I'll show you what happens if we didn't provide the reference, right? So I'll just type the data range and close the bracket and enter. And this is partially complete actually, right? Not to show what the mistake is, I'll just type it like this, right? And press enter. We get the rank, right? What we did was just we typed equal rank. We gave the starting and as we press enter, we get the rank. Answer is also correct. No problem. Right? 221 is the first. But when we fill this out, then only we see the problem. Right? I told you, no. Yes, we wrote it partially. Right? Until we write the first one, it is okay. But as soon as we fill it, this answer is totally a failure. Right? Now let's see what has happened. I will click on the second answer and see how the formula has been written, right? So what happened here is, right, they have used the first cell, okay, right, his range, first cell. See what has happened to the range, right? This J7 is okay, right, respectively his cell, but see what happens to the range. It's also shifted. And he has noted this 220, right? That is why he saw the first, right? So when doing a thing like this, we need constant range, right? අපේ range එක නියතයක් විදියට තියෙනවා, constant එකක් විදියට තියෙනවා. ඒක හෙල්ලෙනකොට ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා. We have a problem here. That is the problem we see, right? So when we move to the other cell, see what has happened. It has moved from or insert dollar signs to either sides of these letters. Right now, for example, we have J here, right? We need to add a dollar sign to this side and this side. And for the other one also here. Right? For the range, right? For the range, what we need to do is for the either side of the letters, we need to have dollar signs, right? So after adding the dollar sign, do the filling, then you will see the correct answer, right? So we'll take the third cell as the random, it's okay, and see the difference now, right? The range has not been changed. It is fixed. හරි දැන් හෙල්ලිලා නැහැ දැන් කලින් අර ෆිල් කරාම ඒක හෙල්ලුණා පල්ලෙහාට ගියානේ, right? Now it has not changed, right? It is fixed. So what referencing does is, right, it will keep this range as a fixed range, a constant range, and it will not change when we fill it down, right? So we have to make sure if we want a constant value or a constant cell or a cell reference, we are going to give that cell letters, either side of the cell letters, a dollar sign, right? That is how it is done, right? So I'll just give an example here, right? This is how it is done. Only for the range, not for this cell. This is we kept in the same way, but for the range we give, right? Clearly see, I'll go back, right? This is where the error occurred, right? So see, the range shifts when I fill. So that is the problem. That was the problem. I need to keep it as a fixed range. So what I did was I used referencing to keep it as a fixed range. So it will not change even though I fill it, right? So that is what happens, rank function again, right? So rank function again, like this, right? I'll type it again, right? Equal rank, right? Number means our number, right? The starting cell, our cell, right? Comma, then we have to give the ref and the order here. What they ask is the reference and the order. Order means our data range, right? So we can give our data range. This is our data range, right? From this range only we are going to get the rank. මේ range එකකින් අපි මේක ගන්න position එක ගන්න මේ පන්තියේ මේ ළමයින්ගේ ටිකේ, right? So this will be our range order, right? මේක ඇතුළෙන් පළවෙනිය තේරෙන්න ඕන, දෙවෙනිය තේරෙන්නත් ඕන මේක. From out of this only we are going to take that, right? So we are giving the order, right? So when giving the order, we need to have this order unchanged. Even though we fill it, we have to keep this order unchanged. Otherwise, our answer will go wrong. Right? So what I did was, I gave dollar marks, dollar signs to either side of these letters in the range. That is range එකේ අකුරු වලට විතරයි මේක දෙන්නේ, not for the others. Right? I'll give here dollar signs, sorry, to either sides of this, like this, right? And I will close the bracket and press enter. And when I fill it, there is no problem. So it will be filled very casually, right? The order will not be changed. It is fixed, right? So that is what happens when you give a cell reference, right? So I have given it here, right? I'll put it in the chat as well. Like this, right? So that is how the position or the rank function is done, right? And I will talk another function, right? One of the members told me to discuss the power function, right? So I'll talk about the power function because he said me that you will be using the power function here. Now this is a sample example of the power function and how chart is also inserted. I will show these two in this activity, right? Now this is a simple example. I'll delete it here, right? So what they ask here is, right, draw a graph of the given function for given values x and n, right? So this is the formula, right? මේකට අදින්න කියලා කියනවා අපිට graph එක. හරිද? y සමානයි x වර්ගය බලයෙන්. හරිද? x to the power n, right? So n would be 2, right? So we need to get the power, right? Power එක බලයක් ගන්න කොහොමද කියන එක තමයි බලන්න. හරිද? දෙකේ බලය කොහොමද ගන්න, තුනේ බලය ඒ විදිහට ගන්න කොහොමද කියන, right? So in order to get the power, we have a specific formula called power, right? So when writing those functions, it is like this, right? I'll just show a sample here first, right? I need to get 2 to the power of 2, right? So what I can do here is I can get it like this. This is the function equal power, right? When I'm writing the function, it asks for 2 parameters, which is the number and the power, right? So then for the number, I can give a number, and for the power also, I can give the number, right? 2 to the power of 2. So what I'm giving, the number and the power, right? So when I press enter, you can see the 2 to the power of 2 answer can be obtained, right? So that is how the power function works, right? It is written like this: equal power, number, and the power. Those are the parameters. We give the number here and the power. Right. So when we write 2 to the power of 2, what we do is we give the number and we give the power here. And so for example, let's take 3 to the power of 2. Then we can take like this: 3 and 2. Right. So likewise, now here in this activity, what I'm going to discuss is I'm going to draw a graph. Right. අපිට graph එකක් අඳින්න කියලා කියනවා. මොකද්ද formula එක වෙන්නේ? y අපිට calculate කරගන්න ඕනේ. We need to calculate y. So y is x to the power of n. හරිද? x වල මෙන්න මේ වර්ගයේ බලය තමයි අපි ගන්න. හරිද? x වල අගයන් ටික අපිට දීලා තියෙනවා. We have been given the x values, right, coordinates. So we are going to get the power of this x as the answer for y. හරිද? මම ගන්න හදන්නේ මෙතන දෙකේ වර්ගය මෙතන දෙකේ බලය මෙතනට එනවා. 2 to the power of 2 මෙතනට එනවා. 4 to the power of 2 මෙතනට එනවා. ඒ විදිහට answer එක ගන්න. We are going to get the answer. Right? So in order to get that, what I can use is the power function. Right? So I'll use it equal power. Right? Equal power and open bracket, and the number would be x. Right? So this is the function, right? X to the power n. So the x kila කියන්නේ මෙතන අපේ number. This is our number. Right? So I'll give x and gamma. The power would be this. Right? E4 would be our power. Right? So I'm not going to just write it like this. Right? Because this power is the same for the others also. Right? So it is unchanged. දැන් බලන්න ඕගොල්ලෝ මෙතන අනිත් අයටත් යන්නේ මේ බලයම තමයි. දෙවෙනි බලයම තමයි යන්නේ. හරිද? ඒතකොට මේක change වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මේක fixed තියෙනවා. rank එක වගේ තමයි. Similar to the rank. It is unchanged. Right? So what I'm going to do is I am giving this number and the power, I'll give it as a reference here. So it will be unchanged no matter how I fill it. දැන් fill කරන් යනකොට වෙන්නේ ඇත්තටම G7 මාරු වෙනවා. ඊළඟට අදිනකොට G8 වෙනවා. G9 වෙනවා. G10 වෙනවා. මේ විදිහට මේක වෙනස් වෙනවා මේක fill කරගෙන යනවා. හැබැයි අපි මෙතන මේක මෙහෙම දැම්මම ඒක වෙනස් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. It won't change. G change වුණාට E4 change වෙන්නේ නැහැ. Right? So I'll give the formula like this: equal power G7 and the power as like this, and enter. So I'll get the power. Right? 2 to the power of 2 is equal to 4. And when I go to the other cell, I'll fill it. So I'll get 4 to the power of 2 is equal to 16. Right? So if we look at the answer, you see that H7 and E4. Right? H7 and E4. E4 is not changing. Even though it changed from G7 to H7, E4 is not changing. It is fixed. Right? So I'll fill it all from here to here. So you can see the answer for everything is taken. Right? So let's randomly take this one. How the answer is taken. M7. Right? This is M7 to the power of E4. Not changed. Right? So we can get the values. Right? So අපිට graph එකක් නේ අඳින්න කියන්නේ. So we calculated y using this formula as a power of x. Right? xy තියෙනවා අපිට දැන්. We have x and y. So we need to draw a graph or a chart. Right? So in order to draw a graph or a chart in Excel, right, it is very easy. Right? So as you can remember in Word, what we did was when we want to insert a chart, right? I'll just go back to Word to show that, right? Just to simply show that, right? In Word, what we did was we went to insert option, and then we went to chart, right? And then we selected the chart and we clicked on OK, right? So as soon as we clicked on OK, the chart is inserted, then an Excel file appears, right? So that is where we entered our data, right? When we enter data here, automatically the graph changes. That is how the chart was inserted in Word, right? But in Excel, it is quite different, right? Because actually we are working in Excel, right? So we are not getting another Excel file when inserting the chart, right? So if we go in the normal way that we did in Word, right? Just I will go just insert and take a chart, you will get nothing. See, it's just a white piece of paper appearing, no chart, right? So adding a chart in Power Excel is different from PowerPoint and Word, right? So what we have to do is, if we need to insert a chart, first we need to select the data, right? What we want to draw in the graph, we need to select the data. Now, for example, in our case, X and Y, these are our data. X, Y අපිට අඳින්න තියෙන්නේ. පොඩ chart එකට ඇඳෙන්න ඕන දේ අපි තෝරන්න. We need to select it. The x-axis this way, right? 2, 4, 6, like this. And these are the values that we got from our formula. The y numbers we got from our formula. Right? This is the y-axis and this is the x-axis. Right? So we can give it a name. Right? Here it's a random name, so we can give it a name here. Y equal x n graphs. This is our graph, right? So we can give it a name and we can move it in our sheet and keep it anywhere, right? So when we get the chart, right, you all can remember this now, right? We get the chart options, right? Similar to Word, we get the chart options in Excel as well, right? So that we can customize our chart. If we want, we can go for a different template, right? We can change the colors of this chart if we want, right? Likewise, we can make changes to our chart from this chart options, right? And in the meantime, you have this plus button where you can add or remove chart elements. And if you want to add elements, you can press this plus button and you can add or remove elements. Right now, axes means this x and y axis. Right, we can either remove it or add it. Right, and we can add the axis titles. Right, so axis titles we can add, and we can type anything for this titles. For example, I'll type this is the y-axis. This is the y-axis, and this is the x-axis, x and y, right? So I can add other things, data labels. If I want to show the data which is shown here, I can add data labels, right? I can add the legend, right? Or a trend line. Likewise, I can add or remove elements here also we can add the chart, right? Now suppose I want to add a chart or create a chart with the student name and these marks for English, Maths and Science. So what I can do here is I can select this range, right? This is the data that I need to draw the chart. I can go to insert and select chart, right? And as soon as I click on the chart, you can see that a chart is created. I'll move it this way. Right. So you can see Saman Kamal, all those things, and English, Math, Science, all those things. I can give a title here if I want. Grade 10 marks. Right. Likewise, I can do, and I can add or remove here also. If I want titles, I can add or I can remove. Right. That is how you add a chart in Excel. Right. So those are the functions that I thought would be useful to you all, right? This power function and these functions, sum, average, pass, fail, all those functions, right? These are very general functions, right? But could be useful for you, right? So when we talk about the functions in Excel, there are hundreds of functions in Excel, right? So to be honest, actually, I also don't know every function, right? It's very hard to learn all these functions, right? What you can do here is, right, if you are working with Excel, always make sure there is a function for everything that we can do, right? So if you are facing some problem with some function or if you want to do something specific on Excel, just try to Google it, right? If you Google it, you can find the respective function for that, and they show the syntax also, how to write it. So what you can do is just follow the guidelines and use the function, right? What I do, I'm talking from my experience, right? So I also don't know each and every function, right? For example, I'll show you the functions, right? See, when I go to the formula tab, there are hundreds of functions, right? In the financial section, there are functions. In the logical section, there are functions, right? In the text section, there are functions. There are number of functions here, right? There are even more, right? Here we have only a few, right? There are more functions here, statistical engineering like this. So we can't learn or we can't keep in mind all these functions, right? But for each and everything that we do in Excel, there's a function. What you have to do is just, if you don't know a function, just Google it and find the syntax like this, how it is written, so that we have to give our values to these parameters only. So the function will give out the answer. We are just making changes to these parameters only, right? So I think you all got a basic idea on how to work with Excel and the basic functions and how to insert a chart in Excel, right? So that's all for our today's session. So if you have any questions with what we did today, you can ask.
Sir, can you explain a little bit about the data filtering and sorting?
Data filtering. Okay, right. So data filtering part, let's take the sample data. Let's take, for example, let's take these numbers. Right. So if we have some data here, right, we can sort and filter our data according to our preference. Right. Now, for example, if we want to sort or filter this data in the home tab, we have this sort and filter option here. Right. So as soon as we click on this button, we see two sorting options here: sort from the smallest to largest and sort from largest to smallest, which is ascending and descending. Right. So if we click on smallest to largest, what happens is you can see the data is changed here. Right. So data is very similar. So it is hard to find changes. Wait. Let's take this data set. Right. Now see, I'll apply from smallest to largest. So you can see 35 comes to the top and 78 goes to the bottom. Right. And if I do vice versa, it happens other way. Right. That is how you sort normally. Right. And also apart from that, you can use custom sorting options. Right. You can sort customly if for your own requirement. Right. You can go to custom sort and you can add a sorting order, right, or way to sort it, right. Now, for example, now for this we can actually can't do any sorting. Let's take an example like this, what I do normally, right. So sometimes I do a thing like this. This is what I do, right. I get numbers of students like this, right? Phone numbers, right? So phone numbers go like this, no? Phone double seven. Right. For example, just I wrote sample numbers, right? So this is what I do sometimes at office, right? So I get numbers like this, right? So sometimes I send SMS for students by sorting their mobile operator, right? So I need to differentiate who is Dialog, who is Mobitel, right? Who is Hutch likewise, right? So when I get a data set like this, I need to differentiate those things, right? So here you can see Mobitel numbers, right? Hutch numbers like this. So I need to differentiate. So what I do is I'm sorting them. So this is jumbled, right? So I can't sort it. So what I'm going to do is show an example how to sort this, right? So I'll select the data like this, and I'm going to custom sort, right? And in custom sort, I am using an order which is custom, specific list, right? Not the smallest to largest or largest to smallest. I am using custom list, right? There, yeah, the list I'm using, right? I'll delete it and I'll show you here, right? So here you can uh, enter a custom sorting list on how the list is sorted, right? So here you can see sample list, Sunday, Monday, like this lists, right? So here you can enter a custom sorting procedure, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort those numbers according to their mobile operator, right? So the mobile operator is identified from the first three numbers, no, 0, 7, 1, like that. So I'm typing the list I want, right? So I'll write like this, note 41, that is one type. And then I'm typing 0, 7, 0. There's a number called 0, 7, 0. Then 0, 7, 1, 0, 7, 2, 0, 7, 4, 0, 7, 5, 0, 7, 6, 0, 7, 7, 0, 7, 8. Likewise, I'm giving a list to be sorted, starting from 0, 4, 1 to 0, 7, 8. So I'm giving an order, see, right? මම order එකක් දෙන්න පිළිවෙලක් දෙන්න මෙන්න මේ විදිහට sort කරන්න. මේ numbers වල. Right? So I'm creating a list and adding it. So you can see the list is added here and I'm okaying it. So the list is added here. Now clearly see this is the earlier one, right? This is the numbers that I typed. Now see what happens after I click OK. The numbers are sorted now. See, note 41 number is at the beginning. Note 71 is at the second. Note 72, note 74, 76, 77, 78. Right. So it is ordered according to my custom list by the first three numbers. Right. Now this is what I do actually. Right. You can likewise create custom sorting lists here. From here you can add the list and sort it. Right. Now, for example, suppose you have a list of names, right? So you have to filter the names with Kamal to one group, Saman to one group, likewise. Then list එකක් තියෙනවා නම් list එකක් තියෙනවා. Samanla වෙන් කරලා ගන්න ඕන, Kasunla වෙන් කරන්න ඕන, එහෙම එහෙම ගන්න ඕන කියලා හිතන්න. Right? So you can create a list here, right? Kasun, Saman. Likewise, then you can apply it to a list so that they will be sorted out clearly. Right? Anything you can do like that with custom sorting. Right? And the other thing is filters. Right? We can add filters here. Right? So for the data range also, I can add filters, but nothing will happen here. Right? When I add filter, you will see these numbers as a filter here. Right? But here actually you can't see because all the data are different. If you have similar data, you can see this. Right? Now, for example, I'll show it like this. Let's take this data. And I will add the column called gender. Right? And male. This one also male. Let's take this one as Nimali. Female, male. Right, like this. So I'm going to add the filter for this column, gender column. Right, I'm going to add the filter like this, and I can filter now from their gender. Right, now see what happens when I untick male and click OK. Right, what happens now? Only the female students are shown here. Others are neglected. Right, and I can, if I want the male ones, I can click on male and show out the male ones here. Right? Likewise, I can add a filter, but filters work only for common data, right? Like male, female, or something general. Right? If the data set is totally different, you can't use filters. That won't be effective. Right? For a scenario like this, you can use filters. Right? How to assign A, B, C, SW for respective marks. Right. A, B, C. Let's take an example. Let's take this example. Very easy, no? Right. Let's take only English. So I'll remove the filter. Right. So what that student asks is the grade, how to take the grade. By looking at the mark, how to take the grade. Right. So this is also actually from done by using the if function. Right. If right. So pass fail also we used an if, and for a scenario like this also we can use the if. Right. So the only difference is how if is written. Right. So you have to again recall the memory for the if function. Right. So if what we did was if logical test value if true and value if false. This is what we wrote, right? So this same thing is written here, but here we do a thing called nested if, right? We are going to write if inside an if. If එක ඇතුලේ if එකක් ලියන්න හදන්නේ මෙතන. මොකද මෙතන condition ප්‍රමාණය වැඩි. We have many conditions, right? Because when we see at the scenario, we have many conditions, right? 75 or greater, we have A. 65 or greater than or equal, we have B. Right? Then 55, right? 55 or greater than, we have C. Then 35 or greater than or equal, we have S. And below 35, we have W, no? S, F we have, right? We have many conditions, right? If the mark is greater than or 75A, like this, we have many conditions. So with a single if, we can't write everything. Right? Because we saw in if, what we can do is we can only put one condition. We can't write many. Right? So if to write a condition like this, many conditions, we are doing nested if. Right? We are writing if inside another. Right? So carefully watch how I do this. Right? I'll zoom it. Carefully see how I'm going to do it. Right? I'll just spread it out. Right? So I'm starting if. Right? And for the logical test, I'm going to give these conditions and I need to start from one side. Right? Right? So I'm starting from here. I will write like this. If H5 is greater than or equal 75. And if H5 is greater than or equal 75, then what we are going to do, if the condition is true, we are showing A. Right? Value if true is A. Right? If the condition is true, we are showing this value if true. And value if false. Right? Now, what if the condition is false? We are not going to exit. Right? We need to check for the other condition. If it is less than 75, then we need to check for the other. So without writing the value if false, what we are writing here is another if. Right? Not writing the value if false, we are writing another if to check it whether H5 is greater than or equal 65. Right? Whether it is greater than or equal 65. Right? Now see the flow actually, right? What happened here is, first he will check whether it is greater than or equal 75. Right? If it is greater than 75, it will show A. Right? So if it is less than 75, what it will do is it will jump to here, this section. Right? That is how it works. Right? It will straightly jump to this value if false section. Right? So when it comes here, there is another if. There is no value if false. There is another if. Right? So he will check for the other condition. I'll explain it in single as well, right? To get an idea, better idea, right? The method the වෙන්නේ 75ට වැඩිද කියලා බලනවා. හරිද? 75ට වැඩිද කියලා බලලා 75ට වැඩි නම් ඒක දෙනවා. බැරි වෙලාවත් 75ට අඩු වුණොත් මෙයා එනවා value false එකට. හරිද? එතකොට value false එකක් නැහැ. එතන තියෙන්නේ තව if එකක්. එතනදි බලන්නේ 65ට වඩා වැඩිද කියලා විතරයි. මොකද අනිවාර්යෙන්ම මෙතනට පයින්වයි කියලා කියන්නේ 75ට අඩු සංඛ්‍යාවක් තමයි අනිවාර්යයෙන්. ඒ නිසා ආයෙ චෙක් කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ 75ට වැඩිද කියලා. අපි බලන්නේ 65ට වඩා වැඩිද කියලා විතරයි. මොකද 75ට වැඩි නම් ඒක දෙනවා මෙතන. හරිද? මෙතන එනකොට 65ට වැඩිද කියලා බලන්න. We are checking it. So if it is greater than 65, we are giving B. Right? So if it is greater than 65, we are giving B. So if it is less than 65, we are going to check it again. Right? We are giving another if. Right? And we are going to check whether it is greater than or equal 55. And see the flow, right? It's very complicated, right? See the flow, then you will get an idea. Right? 65ට වඩා වැඩි නම් B එක දෙනවා. ඊටත් අඩුයි නම් ආයෙ විසික් කරනවා ඊළඟ if එකට. එතනදි බලනවා 55ට වඩා වැඩිද කියලා. Right? If it is greater than 55, then it will give C. What if it is less than 55? Then it will check again whether it's greater than or equal 35. Right? Then it will give S. Right? Now, actually, this is like a filter. Right? First is check whether it is greater than 75. Then it will give an A. If it is less than 75, it will check whether it is greater than 65. Then it will give B. If it is less than 65, it will check whether if it is greater than 55. Then we'll give a C. If it is less than 55, it will check whether it is greater than 35. Right? Then it will give an S. And if it is less than 35, we don't need to check again. We can directly give F. Right? We don't need to check again. Right? So we can give the value with false directly. And 75ට වැඩි නම් A දෙනවා. එතන ඒක අඩුයි නම් එයා බලනවා 65ට වඩා වැඩි. එහෙනම් B එක දෙනවා. ඊටත් අඩුයි නම් බලනවා 55ට වඩා වැඩිද. C එක දෙනවා. ඊටත් අඩුයි නම් බලනවා 35ට වඩා වැඩිද. එහෙනම් S එක දෙනවා. ඊටත් අඩුයි නම් ආයෙ චෙක් කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. කෙලින්ම F එක තමයි දෙන්නේ. මොකද මෙතනට එනවා කියන්නේ අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම 75ටත් අඩු 65ටත් අඩු 55ටත් අඩු 35ටත් අඩු සංඛ්‍යාවක් තමයි එන්නේ. We are getting a value less than everything. So we need to check again. Right? So in order to end this function, we need to close all these brackets. Right? So we have opened 4 brackets. So we need to close them at the end. Right? And press enter. Then you will get the answer. Right? You get an S here. And I'll fill it out. And you can see the respective grade for the mark will be obtained. 85A, 65B, I'll make it 69. Sorry, 69, I mean 76, you get an A, right? And I'll change it as 34 here, you get an F, right? And here I'll make it 58, sorry, 52. You get, sorry, 58, yeah, 58, you get a C, right? So these are the grades you can see, right? Everything is visible here, right? So it works as like this, right? It's very complicated, but the same if that we used was used here, right? So I'll put it here, you can refer it later, right? So that is how the A, B, C, S, W respective marks are given in Excel. Right. Hope I answered your question. right? Okay, so that's it for our today's session, right? So I think I have answered all your questions. Okay, so let's right. And on our next day, we will be having Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Google Forms likewise on the cloud platform on how to use those cloud services, right? So then let's wind up today's session then, and good night for you all.